All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's break down the main event for this weekend's fight night in the Apex Center between the former welterweight champion Belal Muhammad facing the number 9 ranked welterweight in the world, Gabriel Bonfim. Now let's look at the tail of the tape for these gentlemen first. All right. Belal Muhammad has 30 professional fights going into this bout this weekend against his opponent who has 20 professional fights. And his opponent has a 2-inch reach advantage. They both have the same reach. Their age is a 9-year age gap. And then looking at the odds, Belal Muhammad, the former welterweight champion, is a minus 125 favorite compared to his opponent's plus 105 underdog, almost a pick 'em odds. Now let's see what makes Belal Muhammad a dangerous opponent, shall we? So he trains at a Valley Flow Striking in Chicago, Illinois, with UFC fighters like Ignacio Bahamondes, Charles Radke, and he's also, like I said, a former UFC welterweight champion 2 years ago. But unfortunately, his first fight he had right after that was against Jack Della Maddalena at UFC 315, and he would lose via 5-round unanimous decision. Two judges gave it 48-47 and one 49-46, making Jack Della Maddalena the new welterweight champion. And in his next fight, about 6 months after, in November, he would fight Ian Gary to a 3-round unanimous decision loss. Two judges gave it 29-28, one 30-27. And then now Ian Gary from that win is going to be challenging for the welterweight championship himself against Islam Makhachev at UFC 330, more than likely. Now let's look at Belal Muhammad's start in the UFC. He made his debut back in 2016, losing to Alan Jouban by a 3-round unanimous decision. But what has made this man such a dangerous opponent? And being obviously a former UFC welterweight champion. Well, let's look at some of his best wins he's had. Gilbert Dorino Burns. When he took on Gilbert Burns, he had already won 3 of his last 4 fights heading into that bout. And let's look at those. So the 4 fights are coming off of a loss to Kamaru Usman, the welterweight champion, the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world, who defended his belt against Gilbert and defeated him by 3rd-round knockout. And then Gilbert would get back on the win column by defeating Stephen Wonderboy Thompson by 3-round unanimous decision. Then he would have a fight that was a Fight of the Year candidate with Khamzat Chimaev at welterweight that we all know he would go on to become the future middleweight champion of the world. After that, he gets back on the winning side by defeating Neil Magny by 1st-round arm triangle choke, and then he would continue that momentum into Miami, Florida at UFC 287 and defeat Jorge Masvidal by 3-round unanimous decision, leading into the fight with Belal Muhammad to determine who will be the number 1 contender for the welterweight title. In a 5-round war, Belal Muhammad beats Gilbert Burns 50-45 across 2 judges' scorecards. Now let's see what's another impressive win after that. A training partner of Gilbert Burns at the Killcliff FC fight team, Vicente the Silent Assassin Luque. Now let's see what makes him such a dangerous opponent. When he took on Belal Muhammad in their rematch fight, he had just won 10 out of 11 straight fights. But the fight that took place before those 11 fights would transpire was against Leon Rocky Edwards, which he would lose a 3-round unanimous decision. And we all know Leon would go on to become the UFC welterweight champion. After that, he would Darce choke Nico Price, very nice. He would send Chad Laprice, the Ultimate Fighter winner, into the Shadow Realm. Then he sent the lightweight who moved up to welterweight, Jalen Turner, back down to lightweight. And then he TKO'd Brian Barberina, a veteran 170-pounder, and then another knockout over Dennis Kruskis. And then after his 6-win stretch of finishes, or 5 wins, I should say, his 6th win was against Mike Perry by unanimous decision. And we all know he is the king of violence and is impossible to finish if you're Vicente Luque. And then he unfortunately suffered the 1 loss in that 11-fight stretch against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson by 3-round unanimous decision, and then would get back on the winning track by defeating Nico Price in a rematch because of a 3rd-round doctor stoppage due to a cut below his right eye. And then he went on to continue with that by defeating Randy Brown, sending him to the Shadow Realm. Also, choking out former welterweight champion Tyron Woodley. As soon as he released this Darce choke, you can see the face of the former champion gasping for air. And then he would say that's twice as nice and do the same thing to number 5 ranked welterweight at the time, Michael Chiesa. Back to back Darce choke finishes, which would get him the rematch against an opponent he's already defeated before in Belal Muhammad. But unfortunately, Belal would take this rematch on his side. It was a 5-round fight night main event. Belal Muhammad showed the younger prospect coming up that he is still head and shoulders above him, even though he did get sent to the Shadow Realm 6 years prior to this fight rematch taking place, and then got revenge by defeating him on all 3 judges' scorecards. And now we go to the third most important opponent that Belal Muhammad has defeated, and that is the undefeated 15-0 and 5-0 in the UFC, Sean Brady. Now, when Sean Brady came to the UFC, he defeated Ultimate Fighter winner Court McGee in his UFC debut without half the tattoos on his body. Then would go on to defeat Ismail Nardiev by unanimous decision. He would submit in a guillotine show Christian Aguilera, and then top that with another submission against Jake Matthews with a mounted arm triangle choke off to the right side, or yes, of Sean's body anyway. And then his last win before he would take on Belal Muhammad came against the same opponent Vicente Luque fought before he fought Belal again, Michael Chiesa. But instead of finishing him, he won a 3-round unanimous decision and then would face Belal Muhammad and would get defeated by second round TKO. And finally, the last best opponent that Belal Muhammad has defeated, the former welterweight champion on the world, Leon Rocky Edwards, who was on a 13-fight unbeaten streak before he took on Belal Muhammad in their rematch. Let's look at Leon Edwards' career. So the 13-fight unbeaten streak would start after he would lose the first fight to the future pound-for-pound #1 welterweight champion Kamaru Usman. And yes, we will see that tie in very shortly, trust me. So then he would start his win streak by defeating Dominic Juarez by unanimous decision. He then rear naked choked Albert Tumanov in the 3rd round, very nice. And then he, as we referenced earlier, defeated Vicente Luque by 3-round unanimous decision and would continue his win streak on by defeating Brian Barberena by unanimous decision, by TKOing with 1 second left in the 3rd round Peter Zapata by referee stoppage, and then would defeat Donald Cowboy Cerrone in a 5-round main event war that he got his first main event in and defeated the veteran like Cowboy, and then would double that down and then face Gunnar Nelson in the co-main event to a split decision 3-round war. And then we get to some interesting details, ladies and gentlemen. Well, first, he gets one more main event under his belt, defeating the former lightweight champion Rafael Dos Anjos 5-round unanimous decision. And now it's about to get interesting. So he's supposed to fight the former welterweight champion Tyron Woodley at the March 21st event, 2020, which we all remember the pandemic started a week prior. So now that fight gets canceled. So he's now slated to face the future middleweight champion of the world in Khamzat Chimaev at welterweight, of course. But this fight never took place. December 19th, it's rescheduled to January 20th. This fight never takes place. It's rescheduled again to March 13th, a month after UFC 258. And when Chimaev is unable to compete in this fight, Belal Muhammad defeated Diego Lima with a 3-round unanimous decision and would get the short notice opportunity to face Leon Edwards in the fight night main event. And what would happen in this fight, ladies and gentlemen? Leon Edwards hit Belal with the finger poke of doom, rendering this contest over. It's a no contest ruling, and Belal Muhammad is removed of his opportunity to win his first UFC main event. So we continue on. What does Leon Edwards do? He gives some sportsmanship to Belal, but then trash talks him afterwards, and then faces the superstar of the sport, Nate Diaz, in a 5-round war. But in the 5th round, mind you, he got stalked and slapped by Nate Diaz and got pointed at and was on dancing chicken legs, and it was awesome. And then after this fight, we all know he head kick knocked out Kamaru Usman in the final minute of the 5th round, a fight he was losing, to win the welterweight title, sending him to the Shadow Realm. And in a rematch for the trilogy, since they're 1-1 against each other, Leon Edwards would defeat Kamaru Usman via 5-round majority decision, and then would go on to have the most boring welterweight title defense in UFC history against Colby Covington, another 5-round unanimous decision victory. But then it's time for the rematch against Belal Muhammad, and unfortunately, he would lose this time by unanimous decision in his home country of England, and Belal Muhammad became your welterweight king. Now, on top of becoming the king, what led to that is similar to Leon Edwards. He developed an 11 fight unbeaten streak himself. Let's check it out. So he defeated Curtis Millender by unanimous decision and would top it off by submitting Takashi Soto with a rear naked choke in the third round, defeating Lyman Good by unanimous decision. And then here's the fight we referenced earlier with Diego Lima, which then would lead to his no contest with Leon Edwards, and then starting back the win streak to the welterweight title. Defeating Damian Maia, former middleweight and welterweight title challenger, unanimous decision. Defeating Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, two-time welterweight title challenger. Defeating Vicente Luque, the man that knocked him out prior and got revenge in 5 rounds. Defeated Sean Brady, took the O away from his undefeated record. Defeated Gilbert Burns to earn himself the #1 contendership against Leon Rocky Edwards in his home country, and he got the job done, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, his losses, as I reminded, the debut against Alan Jordan, knocked out by the man he got revenge against, Vicente Luque. Also knocked out, you can see him behind Jeff Neal in the corner, sitting on the stool behind him while his hand's being raised. And then his last 2 losses, his last 2 fights, Jack Della Maddalena, the former middleweight or welterweight champion, and a future welterweight champion potentially in Ian Machado Gary. Now that we've broken down everything of Belal Muhammad, let's look at Gabriel Bonfim. Now, right next to him is his brother Ishmael, and that's the gym they train at in the Federale District Center of Brazil, the Bonfim brothers. Now, he has a 6-1 UFC record. Now, let's look at what he's done so far in the promotion. He came in from the Contender Series, winning his fight very impressively, and as a first round arm triangle choke over Trey Waters. And then he would come in and make his debut against Munir Lazzez and had a quick under a minute guillotine choke victory. And this would start his UFC career. He just won his debut. He would then double down and have back-to-back guillotine victories. But then he would take a TKO loss, his only loss in his career, to Nicholas Dalby, of all people. And that's how Nicholas Dalby finished his opponent, his first loss in Gabriel Bonfim's career. And then he comes back from that in a fight night in Denver, Colorado, which I witnessed and watched personally. He defeated Angelusa by 3-round unanimous decision, and then would go on to defeat Chaos Williams by Darce choke. You can see right here, he is sending him unconsciously to the Shadow Realm. And then he would defeat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, a similar opponent that Belal Muhammad has defeated, would defeat by unanimous decision in 3-round war. And then in his last victory in a main event bout, he would defeat Randy Brown via 2nd round knockout. And now let's look at who are the 3 most important opponents in Gabriel Bonfim's record. First, Chaos Williams. He had won 4 of his last 5 bouts before taking on this weekend's main event fighter. And he had defeated Matthew Semmelsberger by 3-round unanimous decision. Sent Miguel Baeza to the Shadow Realm in the 3rd round knockout. Then lost a 3-round split decision to already mentioned Randy Brown. That's the one loss in the 5-fight stretch. Then would beat Rolando Badeo with a 3-round unanimous decision victory, and would also send Carlston Harris to the Shadow Realm by 1st round knockout. Then he went on to face Gabriel Bonfim and got choked out by a Darce choke. Again, hilarious. And the second most important opponent that Gabriel has defeated, Randy Brown. Again, another opponent who won 4 of his last 5 bouts before his first main event against Bonfim. He beat Wellington Turman, 3-round unanimous decision. He would then knock out the Kung Fu King Muslim Salakovs to the Shadow Realm. He would beat I forget who this was. Oh, that's right. That's Alessio Zalecki dos Santos. 3-round unanimous decision. And then would lose a split decision loss, very controversial, to the Ultimate Fighter Season 29 winner, Brian Battle. And then would knock out Nicholas Dalby, the man that has the only loss on Gabriel Bonfim's record. He sent him face first down to the canvas. And then he got sent, well, not face first, but down to the canvas, essentially the same way by Gabriel Bonfim. And lastly, the most impressive win on Bonfim's record is the two-time former welterweight title challenger, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He, unfortunately, was the opposite of Randy in Chaos. He lost 4 of his last 5. He lost, we mentioned earlier, the unanimous decision to Gilbert Burns. We mentioned the loss he had to Belal Muhammad. Then he would win a 4th-round TKO doctor stop or in the corner stoppage against Kevin Holland in a main event fight. Then would get choked out by the undefeated, scariest man in the division, Shavkat Rakhmonov in the 3rd round. And then he would get knocked out by Joaquin Buckley in the 3rd round, and then led to his 3-round unanimous decision defeat to Gabriel Bonfim. Now that we broke all that down, here we are. We're getting into the main event this weekend. Who do I pick to win? Well, again, looking at the losses of Belal Muhammad losing to the former welterweight champion Jack Della Maddalena, and Gabriel Bonfim losing to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, or beating Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, also a similar opponent that Belal Muhammad has. Ian Gary's also another defeat on Belal Muhammad's record. Randy Brown, someone that we just referenced that Gabriel Bonfim has knocked out in his career, but guess who's also defeated him? Well, that would be Belal Muhammad, but instead 3-round decision still. It's all good. I'm picking Belal Muhammad to win this fight via 5-round unanimous decision because of experience. The best wins that Gabriel Bonfim has, like we just saw against Randy Brown and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, are the same best wins that Belal Muhammad has. So with that being said, I'm picking a 5-round unanimous decision victory for the former champion.